Star Trek is too liberal, it's too woke, it's all this, it's all that. It's something you hear a lot, and it's sort of implying that it was more conservative back then, but I'm not sure if that's entirely true. I mean, considering the supposed first interracial kiss on American TV, and that episode with people with half white, half black faces as an allegory for racism. I mean, that episode came out in 1969, and just to give a bit of context here, the civil rights movement was in full swing, and Martin Luther King was assassinated a year prior. And the message of the episode was explicitly that deeming someone to be less than you based on the colour of their skin was a really silly idea.
Loci is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
You blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me.
You're black on one side and white on the other.
I am black on the right side.
I fail to see the significant difference.
Loci is white on the right side. All of his people are white on the right side.
And it represented that with people with these cartoonish looking faces, just to give us, the outsider's perspective onto that culture, and just to say, well, would an outsider look at that and think that we're silly for that? It was a blunt analogy, but it was clear. And let's not make any mistake, the idea that people with different races should be equal was a very liberal idea. The conservative idea was that these others need to know their place. So while I reject the idea that sci-fi has become more liberal, like, what does a conservative sci-fi piece look like? Like, is it in the mainstream? Is it more niche? Are the politics any more or less explicit? Like, let's have a look. First of all, let's define what right-wing or conservatism means. These can include, but aren't limited to, pro-capitalist, pro-deregulation, nationalist, traditionalist, pro-religion, mostly, anti-communist, and support some degree of social stratification. Most people who are right-wing don't have all of those traits, but it's a good place to start. First thing that comes to mind, Starship Troopers. It depicts humans being this ultra-nationalist, fascist regime called the United Citizen Federation. The film follows these school leavers as they go in to join the military, and the whole thing just appears to be some sort of propaganda piece. Think of All Quiet on the Western Front, but with a happy ending. And I don't use the F word lightly. The characters in the film explicitly refer to the failures of democracy, the virtues of violence.
You're using force, and force, my friends, is violence, the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived.
And how service earns citizenship. Citizens are considered to be higher than civilians, hence your social stratification, and you can become a citizen via military service. There's also heavy fascist symbolism within the film. However, the film wasn't supposed to be an endorsement of fascism, but it's supposed to be a critique and a satire of it. It was directed by Paul Verhoeven, who was born in the Netherlands during the Nazi occupation. So unlike most people in the English-speaking Western world, he has actually experienced fascism firsthand. His intention was to get the audience watching these scenes to think, are these people crazy? This is in stark contrast to the book of the same name written by Robert A. Heinlein. It was a lot more explicitly fascist and totalitarian. So the film Starship Troopers, it depicts a far-right society without the film being far-right. It's important to note in a lot of science fiction works that the main characters are often in the said military in the universe.
Starfleet is not a military organization. Its purpose is exploration.
Yes, I am counting Starfleet as a military. Alright, their main goals are like science, exploration, diplomacy, but as soon as like the Dominion or the Borg invades, like who do they send? It's Starfleet. It's the military in all but name. And I bring this up because depending on where someone falls on the political spectrum, it can also change their views of the military. Someone who's more right-wing may support the military a lot more than someone's on their left-wing. This could be due to the regimented hierarchies in the militaries and the serving of the national interest that appeals to the more right-wing sensibilities of social stratification and nationalism. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but if you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments below about that. Now, the narrative in Star Trek mainly follows the Federation, like they're the good guys, so why would they be wrong? And the Federation holds views that regardless of like race, gender, even species, everyone is equal. When who doesn't exist in the Federation?
No money. You mean you don't get paid?
The acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force in our lives.
And education and medical aid are given to those who need it free at the point of delivery. And these are things that explicitly won't happen within a right-wing society, considering that would be anti-capitalist. So I think that firmly puts the world of Star Trek in the left-wing category. Okay, so let's look at the opposite of Star Trek. What's the anti-Star Trek? Battlestar Galactica. The series follows a group of humans who are wiped out by the Cylons, who are a race of machines that the humans created years ago, and now there's only 50,000 people left. Once they die, that's it. Humanity's extinct. Leading the charge is Commander, later Admiral Adama, who is essentially the highest military officer and therefore de facto military leader. And with so much in the balance, he's forced to do some really distasteful stuff. He performs a coup against a legitimate president, he sanctions the use of biological weapons, and approves the use of torture. All for the good of the fleet, or so he tells himself. Now, things with the narrative, it doesn't support his actions, but it doesn't condone them either. Unlike with 24, let's say with Jack Bauer, if he tortures someone and gets information that finds a bomb, he's assured that he did the right thing. He did some distasteful stuff, but he saved lives. He did it for the greater good, or something like that. When Starbuck tortured Leoben, she was a bit conflicted. On the one hand, his kind eliminated her entire race, there's a bomb somewhere in the fleet, and he's not even human anyway, so who cares? On the other hand, she's seeing the suffering that she is putting upon him, and it's her basic human empathy that's conflicting and saying that, no, this is wrong, no, she shouldn't be doing this. And the episode ends with her not really knowing if she did the right thing or not. Now with Adama, he has a strong view of the military and their purpose and their use.
There's a reason why you separate military and the police. One fights the enemy, the state. The other serves and protects the people. When the military becomes both, then the enemies of the state tend to become the people.
He allows the normal function of government to happen even after the worlds have ended, and even host an election. Compare this with Admiral Kane. When she found out the colonies had been nuked, she saw it as her duty to take the fight to the enemy. So when she finally found some civilians later on, did she protect them? No. She decided to take everything she thought she could use from them, be it equipment, resources, even people, and when they wouldn't give it to her, when her ex-so refused to obey orders, she shot him in the head herself. When it came to light that a friend of hers was a Cylon spy, she had her tortured. At first for information, but then just because. So Adama was really a saint by comparison. But the narrative doesn't frame Kane in the same neutrality that frames Adama with. Like, Kane was intentionally a foil for Adama just to see how worse Adama could have been. So does that make Adama right wing? Well, not necessarily. He did favour the ban on abortion in the fleet, not because of his political ideology, but he saw it more as a practical necessity. Humans have become an endangered species, and he's trying to do everything he can to maximise their numbers. So even if Adama falls into the right wing side of the spectrum, I don't think that makes the show right wing. It's very neutral in its telling, and it tells some bleak stories, but it shows you why each character has come to that conclusion, or why each character has done that action. Although a piece of science fiction that would be considered right-wing is Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged that was written in 1957. It depicts an America not suffering from war or a zombie apocalypse, but from the horrors of overregulation. It's implied that the US has become communist and therefore productivity is massively decreased. The book mirrored her politics, with there being prime movers and looters. Looters being the working class, those who just depend on the system, and the prime movers are the ones that own the larger corporations and those that move everything forward. So yeah, I'd say the book is explicitly right-wing. Rand was born in 1905, which made her 12 during the time of the October Revolution in 1917, which saw the Bolsheviks seize her father's business. So it's easy to see how her politics were shaped by her early life, same as Beethoven in Nazi-occupied Netherlands. Okay, I've tried my best to remain sort of like unbiased and balanced throughout this, but at the risk of inserting my own opinion, I would consider myself generally more left-wing. So when I read Atlas Shrugged, there's a bit of a disconnect for me, because I disagree with a lot of the politics in there. Like, I don't believe that people on the ground, the working class, are the looters. I think they're the ones that without them, nothing can get done. So reading a piece of fiction where the message or the politics is something that I really don't agree with, it almost like it breaks my suspension of disbelief. I'm not fully immersed in the world, so I don't really have the same enjoyment of it as I think other people do. On the flip side, let's look back at that episode of Star Trek with the racism thing in it. If someone was vehemently racist and were to watch that episode, it wouldn't cause them to be not racist. It's not going to change their mind. And that's the thing with science fiction. I don't think it changes opinion. It may inform opinion, but I think more than anything, it confirms opinion. And if the majority of science fiction is more left-wing, then I think that's more of a reflection of the audience. And I know it's anecdotal, but I'd say that the majority of the sci-fi audience is more left-wing. And I say that not just because of my own experience, but with science fiction, TV shows and films being a product, you want the most people to watch your stuff as possible. If the values of your product don't align with your audience's values, they're going to tune out. So I think there's a monetary incentive to be more left-wing, hence more of it is. So while I agree that science fiction nowadays is liberal, I'd say, well, it always has been. But hey, that's what I think. What do you think? Do you think I'm right, or am I missing the mark again? Let me know down there, and I shall see you later.